trust and confidence in law enforcement agencies. We believe that they will be able to do everything else they could possible to deal with that deficit. Because the ANC, as a political movement, cannot be seen to be interfering on processes that are supposed to be carried forward by law enforcement agencies. Where there has been injury, where monies have been invested erroneously on issues of COVID-19 or issues believed to be of COVID-19 when they were not exactly doing that way. Such must be uncovered and action must be taken. Because it is this kind of action that we are going to take, which is going to, give the people of this country confidence that we are serious, one, about fighting corruption, but two, about protecting lives.
While the Scorpions launched back in 1999, a lot of success was achieved through this unit. A number of high-profile investigations and cases illustrated how crucial the unit was. Tonight we ask, should the Scorpions be re-established? Good evening, I'm Aldrin St-Pierre, and this is Unfiltered. The unit was key in arresting suspects in the Brett Cable murder case. Some of the other investigations included the travel fraud prosecutions that resulted in 38 cases against members of parliament being concluded, the Sheikh and the Yengeni rulings, as well as the Silibi and Agliotti cases, all originated with the Scorpions. But in June 2008, the Scorpions were disbanded following a resolution by the ANC's Polokwane elective conference back in 2007, a decision which would open the skies to a much now criticized Hawks. Our guest this evening is Advocate Vusi Pikoli, former NDPP. Advocate Velio Hofmeyer is also joining us, a former AFU head, as well as Xolani Dube will be joining us a bit later on, who's from the Chibera Institute for Research and Development. Remember that you can be part of the conversations that we are having here in studio by going onto our social media pages using the hashtag SABC Unfiltered. Send us your questions as well as your comments. Let's first start off with Advocate Vusi Pikoli, who joins us now. Advocate, good evening and welcome to Unfiltered. How would you describe the prevalence of corruption in the country currently and our efforts to fight it? Hi, Advocate Pikoli, can you hear us? Okay, we seem to have a problem with that line over there. Okay, yes, we can hear you now. You can go ahead.
And greetings also to the viewers. Well, perhaps I can just sum it up by making reference to a Concord judgment, which was penned by Justices Dikgang Moseneke and Edwin Cameron. And I quote, "Corruption has become a scourge in our country, and it poses a real danger to our developing democracy. It undermines the ability of the government to meet its commitment to fight poverty and to deliver on other social and economic rights guaranteed in our Bill of Rights. Organized crime and drug syndicates also pose a real threat to our democracy." I suppose that sums it up, Aldrin, about the dangers of corruption and crime in general, and that they seek to subvert our democracy. So that's how we should be able to look at it. And also make the state not be in a position to fulfill its constitutional obligations insofar as the socio-economic rights as outlined in our Bill of Rights.
And the efforts to fight that corruption? Hi, Advocate Pikoli. The question is the efforts, at least from the government side, to fight the corruption. How would you sum that up?
Well, South Africa has got quite a number of law enforcement agencies that are supposed to be fighting corruption. But the problem is that, the multiplicity of these organizations or units tend to deplete the actual force that is required, because you are spreading the very much required resources over a number of bodies. And of course, the track record does not show that we've got as many as about 11 law enforcement agencies that seek to combat corruption. That's why, for instance, the ANC is beginning to speak in the right direction when it sort of talks about creation of a single, anti-corruption unit, and also perhaps to look at organized crime. Therefore, we are able to pull in all the required resources and the skills that are required for us to be able to have a dedicated focus in the fight against corruption.
Looking at the number of agencies that you've listed now, do you think that there is a lack of coordination? That's why we are not seeing the results?
Well, the government always speak of an integrated approach, but at times the more we speak integration, the more fragmented we become. Because all these law enforcement agencies come in as equals. There's no one who's actually, marshalling them into one line, so to say. Therefore, the disparate efforts that are being made are not really fact in terms of efficiency and effectiveness of all the efforts that are being
okay.
all the efforts that are being put in place, basically.
Sure. Xolani Dube also joins us for this conversation. Xolani, what's your take on what Advocate Bikoli has said now?
I believe that the problem with our law enforcement agents is the fact that it has been captured by the ANC and our country to a certain extent. In our country to a certain extent, the ANC has been captured by the underworld. Babu Bikoli can simply attest to that. In her investigation between Ubabahu, the late Jackie Selebi, and those underworld leaders. And so if the ANC is being captured by the underworld, and at the end of the day, it is the ANC that deploy people to such position, I don't foresee the future when it comes to these law enforcement agencies, because they will always serve at the behest of the organization rather than to respect the constitution as well as to the will of the people. And so I think it would be just a merry-go-round that is not going to take us anywhere. I think to a certain extent, there must be a conversation really on how to free these law enforcement agencies from being strangulated by the ANC, also political factions.
Considering that you're mentioning, Xolani, cases dating back to about 13 years ago, do you still hold that view that the ANC is captured by the underworld?
Look, it's very interesting. Currently, in the ANC politics, look at the issue of the Guptas. When you look at how the Guptas were operating, it's clearly indicated that it was an international criminal syndicate, and look at how the so-called our law enforcement agencies were working so close with what you call it, with the Guptas. And also look how dramatic people who are really respecting the constitution of our country, like Babu Bikoli, suffered at the hands of those who were supposed to protect them, but they were led to be devoured by the wolves, the criminals of this world. And so I think, as I'm saying, the ANC has been captured by the underworld, and because it's being financed, the evidence is there. And so I think, as I'm saying, they need really to be that particular conversation. And no wonder now we see AfriForum saying, look, we will do our own prosecution, we'll do our own investigation. We have a vote of no confidence to the state institution. And so it shows really it's beyond fragmentation of this state institution. It's just they are not there, but they are there to serve the faction that is strong in the ANC. As you know today, that the EFF and the others are saying, look, Shamila Patoy is being weaponized to hunt those who are against Praveen and the others.
Yeah.
And in the past, it was Meg Maharaji and as well as Moshe who were saying, look, Budelani Nguga is playing a dangerous factional politics to serve the interest of Uba Thabo Mbeki. And so we will end up in this whirlpool of ANC factions where we train and strangulate these law enforcement agencies.
Okay, so Advocate Bikolia, I'm going to get you to respond to that just after this. We just need to quickly go to an ad break, and when we come back, we'll also have a conversation around how do you insulate these law enforcement agencies from any political interference, and the likes of Advocate Vusi Bikoli has experienced exactly that. That conversation just after this.
There are those who save money on their car insurance with Outsurance and those who haven't yet. If you're one of them and they can't save you money, ask them for 500 Rand. But if you've been with the same insurer and claim free for 3 years, tell them you want a massive 1,500 Rand. Savings or cash, you always get something out. SMS card to 44211 or call 08600 60,000 for a quote.
Wanna find great? Follow me. New listings. Whatever you're looking for, you'll find it on Yap. Yap has a range of great traders and suppliers. Those are our artists. Let me take you to the painters. There you go. All local, all vetted, and all-star rated. Find great on yep.co.za.
Igama lami ndingusindiswa. Igama leproject yethu Phaphama Community Project. Siye sikuthathele ipilisi. Senze sure uba uyasela. Umehluko mkhulu ngoba amaxhawazana lisaguli lo mhlobo. Iveke umhlobo wenene bayo project register kanjani. Babe singamameli radio besingazi kwanto sihlela apha ezilalini. So umhlobo wenene sincede kakhulu. Ndifuna ukukama kwa SABC uthe inkosi kakhulu siyalibulela elithuba.
We live in a new high-tech environment. Because of technology, some of the world's wealthiest people are tech entrepreneurs. Tech is how we play and how we work. For your tech conversation, join me, Phumelele Zondi, on Network every Sunday at 8:30 p.m.
With the country's high COVID-19 infection rate, health conditions in prisons are under the spotlight.
As a result of the overcrowding, these inmates are prone to get infected.
We actually have been able to contain the pandemic quite well in these facilities.
We're sitting with a huge problem, and every day these people are dying. It's a grave humiliation to the human rights of the inmates.
Parole is a privilege. These are people who have committed murder, rape, very serious crimes in our communities. And ideally, you don't want such people being let out willy-nilly without a very due process.
The special rapporteur on the right of everyone to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health. Congratulations on your appointment.
It's fantastic. I think to be entrusted and given the responsibility of such a big mandate is something that I don't take lightly. The biggest role as a special rapporteur on health is to advise the UN on the global trends that are emerging. So that work continues.
Welcome back. You're still watching Unfiltered with me, Aldrin Simpier. We're in conversation with the former head of the NPA, Advocate Vusi Bikoli. We'll also be joined by Willie Hofmeyer, who's the former Asset Forfeiture Unit head, as well as Xolani Dube, who is an analyst from the Juberu Institute for Research and Development. Advocate Bikoli, you wanted to respond to what Xolani was saying earlier on.
Yes. Thank you, Aldrin. There are two issues that I want to address. One is the question of the ANC being captured by the underworld, and secondly, the question of political insulation from political interferences.
Yep.
On the first one, I really understand the anger and frustration because there's no gainsaying the fact that certain elements of government and also perhaps within the ANC could have been captured by the underworld. Hence, all these commissions that we have, starting with your Nugent Commission on SARS, the PIC Commission, which was headed by Judge Lex Mpati, and currently the Zondo Commission. Obviously, things did go pear-shaped, and fortunately, I think we are now at the stage of trying to make sure that perhaps all that rot is being uprooted.
Sorry, Advocate, just need you to quickly explain that that analogy that you used, that things have gone pear-shaped. Pear-shaped how and pear-shaped by who?
Well, the fact that we've got all these commissions that we've had, starting from the Nugent Commission, that looked into problems at SARS, that on its own was an indicator that there was an attempt to try and hijack some of the state institutions. The fact that we have had the Mpati Commission means that the PIC itself was captured by wrong elements, and information has come out of those two commissions, which still has got to be acted on in terms of now official criminal investigations and prosecutions. We have got the Zondo Commission on state capture. I think the issues that Kolani is also referring to, again, we see the regulations of the commission being amended so as to make it easier for the ID, the investigating directorate within the NPA, to make use of that information, convert it into evidential, make it to be of evidential value so that it can be, accused in court for purposes of prosecuting all the wrongdoers. So there's no doubt about that.
Okay.
And the fact that over the last few years, wrong appointments were made in terms of people who were heading these institutions, whether it be in the Hawks or in the NPA. Now, the current situation is different from how it was about 9 years ago, because we have had an open process for the appointment of the NTPP, an open process for the appointment of the new head of SARS, and then also earlier on, with the appointment of General Libya at the Hawks. All those are attempts at trying to undo or unravel what was done in the past. And then the second aspect I want to address would be that of political insulation of these institutions, which is very critical in the sense that you need to have independent institutions that will be true to their mandate in terms of the Constitution. And then political insulation does not necessarily mean lack of political accountability. Because there has to be independence plus political accountability. And for me, the question of independence is very critical. And the way these institutions are established, so that it's not easy to dismantle, for instance, institutions like the DSO at the whim of politicians. We need to make sure that these institutions are insulated from any political interference.
Okay, let me just quickly bring in Willie Hofmeyer into this conversation as well. Good evening and welcome to Unfiltered, Willie. Just taking off from where Advocate Pikoli has left now, and that is the question around insulating these institutions from political influence.
Good evening and thank you for the opportunity. I think that is one of the critical issues, is that as soon as anti-corruption bodies become too effective, there's always a real risk that the governing party at the time may take action against it. I think the protection that we can give is to write something into the Constitution itself.
Something like?
need cooperation from, I think that everybody, all the political parties, I would think, would support a constitutional amendment that gives serious protection to an anti-corruption body. But I think for me, one of the other points I wanted to make is that it is also very critical. How do you keep a body clean, and how do you make appointments in a way that bad people aren't appointed by the president or whoever the appointing authority is?
Mm-hmm.
And what I wanted to make a suggestion is the Special Investigating Unit, while I was the head, we did quite a sophisticated internal integrity process, which included a lie detector test that was done regularly by all the staff and asked a whole series of integrity-related questions.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that you need a sort of independent body, in a sense, that can ensure that those sort of testing is done for all the key law enforcement appointments. But I would go further and say that most of the money we lose is lost through the supply chain management process.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if one puts the key officials in the supply chain management process through that same integrity process, I think we can solve a large part of the problem.
Okay, so this institution that you are proposing, is it merely just a vetting institution, or does it take the shape of a Scorpions, for instance?
I mean, I think we can talk about the models.
Yeah.
So you can have a single institution that does the vetting, that does the prevention or vetting in one sense, plus the enforcement, as some countries have. And I think there are good arguments in favor of a single institution where all the information is available to the people in that institution. But, it is also possible to do a separate law enforcement body from a body whose job it is to ensure that law enforcement and the people in supply chain management stay honest.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so when we come back, let's have that conversation, right, about the appointment of these people, because now we've seen with the appointment of the NDPP, as Advocate Bikole has just mentioned now, that you had that public interview process that took place. But quite interesting as well, during those interviews, one of the suggestions that was made by one of the candidates was that should the NPA not take the shape of a Chapter 9 institution where it is independent from any political head, including the minister? That conversation just after this.
Did you know that as a valid TV license holder, you can now win your share of R500,000 in daily prizes? Yes, you only have to renew or pay your domestic TV license. Then dial *120*45887# or visit tvlicgames.co.za and take a chance at our Wheel of Fortune Spin and Win or Scratch Pad. Enter to win award-winning giveaways such as airtime, shopping vouchers and household appliances. Dial *120*45887# or visit tvlicgames.co.za to enter now. Terms and conditions apply. USSD 20 cents per 20 seconds, R1.50 per entry. T's and C's apply. TV licenses, making more content possible every day. Hashtag made possible by you.
I usually talk to people who've saved on their car insurance, but today I'm talking to all of you who haven't. Because if you call Outsurance and they can't quote you less than what you're currently paying, now you can ask them to give you 500 Rand. And if you've been with the same insurer and been claim-free for the past 3 years, tell them to make it a massive 1,500 Rand. Savings or cash, you always get something out. SMS card to 44211 or call 08600 60,000 for a quote.
Broadcasting plays an important role in the development and advancement of women, as well as the issues that they face.
Having more women in broadcasting means that we can be able to reveal live experiences.
Our voices as women in broadcasting are important to ensure that diverse content is included.
My presence challenges stereotypes. It fights bias, it forces change, and celebrates the potential of women.
The kind of work we do in broadcasting allows us to rewrite history.
Our strength is in our unity, and women can defy the odds.
See expressions sithi halala zimbokodo, halala makhawekazi. Happy Women's Month.
Catch your #1 youth current affairs show, Expressions, every Saturday at 5 a.m.
And welcome back to Unfiltered. As we've indicated that you can be part of the conversation that we're currently having with regards to the law enforcement agencies and absolutely how do you ensure that you insulate them from political interference and what steps can be taken to make sure that they become more effective. You can be part of the conversation using the hashtag SABC Unfiltered. Let's look at some of those tweets that you've sent so far. Here's a tweet from Emmanuel who says, "The Hawks is just a toothless institution which may be corrupt if probed properly, so I have no faith in the Hawks." The Hawks were created by Zuma to stop chasing him. That's a tweet here from Rick Wuhan. Do you have another tweet there? Okay, those are all the tweets that we have. Okay, Advocate Pikoli, let's bring you back up into this conversation again. And the question again that we need to pose is around this suggestion that was made that can you have an NPA that takes the shape of a Chapter 9 institution? Does that give it more independence from political interference as well?
Oh, certainly, Aldrin. You see, the question of Chapter 9 institutions, we should be able to appreciate as to how it came about in the first place. You know, those Chapter 9 institutions are institutions that seek to strengthen our democracy. And I think we're all agreed that corruption by its nature, form and content is anti-corruption. I had earlier on alluded to the fact that corruption prevents the states from carrying out its obligation, particularly as those obligations relate to socio-economic rights, question of elimination of poverty, creation of housing, job creation, and so forth. Therefore, if we are all agreed that corruption seeks to subvert our democracy, and we have got institutions already in the Constitution that are there to strengthen that democracy, it therefore makes sense to have this single anti-corruption agency, being designated as a Chapter 9 institution.
Okay,
and again,
Advocate, let me just quickly say goodbye to our SABC3 viewers. Apologies for that. We're just going to quickly say goodbye to our SABC3 viewers, but the conversation does continue on the SABC News channel 404. Apologies, Advocate, you can continue.
So I'm saying the advantage of designating such a single anti-corruption agency as a Chapter 9 institution seeks to make sure that it's not going to be dismantled at the whim of politicians.
Yeah.
Because of the guaranteed constitutional independence of such a unit. That's very important. And then also the fact, the point mentioned by Willie about integrity testing is a critical issue as well, because you want to have at the head of this institution and also the members of the unit itself to be people whose integrity is beyond reproach. That's when the question of the integrity testing comes in, which already actually You know,
should be there,
it's already there when the SABC Act was amended. You know, there are regulations that have been promulgated to ensure that integrity testing. But again, the issue is always, you know, in acting more than having words on paper, whether this is being utilized effectively. Otherwise, we would not have had some of the appointments that we made, for instance, to be at the helm of the Hawks, if, for instance, there was such an integrity testing, you know, carried out. So it's very important. The last point I want to make on this matter is that, look, I think as a country we need to think beyond the scorpions. You know, scorpions are not here, and they were not also ideally placed. That's why it was easy to dismantle them. So the new thinking around making this a constitutional entity will even make it operate even better than how the scorpions were able to operate, including ensuring the question of security of tenure.
I'm going to come back to that one. Xolani, just quickly, your take on that. Having an anti-corruption agency that takes the form of a Chapter 9 institution, or is given the status of a Chapter 9 institution.
Look, you know what is very interesting in our country? We can have reference when we have such kind of discussions. For example, we can go back to Selby Pakwa, to Lawrence Mushwa, to even to Mamutuli Madonsela as well, now the current incumbent, Umama, the current who is leading that agency. And then on the other side, you go to the Human Rights Commission during the times of Umama Uprex Gavenda and Copeland and the others. And you have to understand that we can have these immaculate institutions, but if the governing party is not having the political will to protect and insulate this institution, I can assure you we'll be doing.
What does that political will look like, Xolani?
Look, that's the thing, you know, that's where we are being caught up, you know, because when these institutions were created, or when South Africa post-1994 was conceptualized, it was conceptualized on the basis of the historical principles of ANC being this honorable organization that will never steal from the people, an organization that will never dismantle the institution that supports and protects those who were previously disadvantaged. And so now we are catch up in that to say, look, those were our liberators, our nowadays oppressors, you know, and they are dismantling each and every institution that's supposed to protect us. And so I think whatever that we conceptualized, we need to insulate it from the governing party, because if we are going to hand it over back to the governing party, as I'm saying, they are going to factionalize it. They are going to destroy it. They are going to weaponize it against the other faction. As I'm saying, look at Mamutuli Madonsela. Look, even also the issue of our judiciary. It nearly collapsed, you know, when Babu Mokwe was being appointed. Others were saying, why not Baba Udihang Mosonek, you know, Mosonek. And so even now, there is also a serious discussion who is supposed to be the successor. And so that's why I'm saying, we need to insulate this institution from the governing party, because we have seen that the governing party is not having a political will. The governing party is not there to serve the interest of the historically oppressed and dispossessed.
Okay, Veli, let me bring you in here. The points that Xolani are raising are quite important, because even though you may have these institutions become institutions because of the human beings that fill those institutions, and the effectiveness of those institutions would be determined by those who work in these institutions. And the reason that I asked this question is looking at the evidence that you gave in the Mohoro inquiry, where you said that they really wanted me out of the NPA and even offered me other jobs so that I could be out of the NPA. So how then do you protect individuals like yourself from being targeted within institutions?
Well, you probably can't do that too much. And I think when you go into a job like that, to some degree, you've got to be tough enough to deal with that. But I think for me, the critical issue both in law enforcement and in the Chapter 9 institutions is to make sure that you appoint people of integrity. And that, for me, is why the issue of integrity testing and very detailed and intensive integrity testing before appointment and after appointment is really, really critical. You know,
how do you test integrity?
People, unfortunately, have turned out to be very politically pliable or willing to play to the tune of politicians. And I think that is what we have to avoid. We have to make sure that those in law enforcement are really tested and regularly tested to ensure that they're still on the right side.
How do you test that? Because I'm now thinking about any other institution is, of course, a political being by its very nature, because we are in a democratic state, and of course, Parliament would play a role in that.
Indeed, but you know, at the Special Investigating Unit, well, I was the head there. We brought in quite a sophisticated integrity program. So we asked people about 40 different integrity-related questions that had to be done under oath. But more importantly, it was done in front of a little machine called a voice stress analysis machine that gives you an indication whether people are telling the truth or not. And I think that is the critical thing that is missing here at the moment. We cannot expect people, if you're simply asking them questions and you're not testing the answers, the bad people are sometimes very sophisticated and very persuasive.
Yeah.
So I think for me, a serious integrity testing program is critical. And not just for the law enforcement appointments, frankly, but also for all of those who are appointed in the supply chain management in government, because that's where the money is stolen. And if you can be sure that those two groups of people are clean, you can pretty much ensure that corruption will be radically reduced.
And what about making sure that the president himself is a person of integrity? How do you get to that level? Let's have that conversation just after this.
We've been all around the country talking to real South Africans about saving money on their car insurance. Let's meet some of them.
There's a silver lining on your windscreen there that is not too flattering.
Are you referring to that crack which happened when we were coming back from Pet the one day?
You seriously got to change that idea. You know that you can claim for your windscreen on the Outsurance app.
You gotta be kidding. Is it as simple as that?
Should we go and get your window fixed right now?
That's a fantastic idea.
I'll navigate. Okay, turn left here. Okay, here we are. There you go. All done. Brand new.
I can't believe how quick and easy that was.
Yeah.
If Outsurance can't save you money on your car insurance, now ask for 500 Rand or a massive 1,500 Rand if you've been with the same insurer and claim free for 3 years.
Who did you speak to, Outsurance?
It was a guy called Neil.
Let's call him.
Yo, I know you were so wonderful. Like, honestly speaking, you've got such a warm personality, and I thank you so much.
Wow, that's so beautiful, man.
And I never thought I'd ever speak to him again.
Noah is the kind of guy who'd make you wanna
Chenchadaide. Yes.
There are so many things you can't change, but luckily paying too much for your car insurance isn't one of them. SMS SAVE to 34473 or call 08600 60000 and Chenchadaide. If you don't do it, you may regret it. So do it now.
Every now and then I come to this car wash in the morning just before I go to work.
What made you decide to go with Outsurance?
I asked Outsurance to give me a quote.
Yeah.
She took me through everything and I was very happy.
How much did you save?
760.
How much did you save?
I know. 760.
Unbelievable. Chenchadaide.
They've all saved. Why shouldn't you? SMS SAVE to 34473 or call 08600 60000 and Chenchadaide.
I understand that there's a family member of yours who gave you something really special. So this is it here?
This is it right here, which my aunt gave me when I bought this car.
Sounds like you're really big on family.
I think my mom is everything to me.
Where are your family?
In Lady Smith?
Yeah. So how much did you actually end up saving?
471 grand.
That must make the trips to Lady Smith a bit more bearable.
It makes
to
it
the
so
petrol
much
tank.
easier. I can't believe it took me this long to change your ding.
If you think it's a hassle to get a quote, put us to the test. SMS SAVE to 34473 or call 08600 60,000 and see if you can save.
What is this? Do you sell eggs for a living?
So I make music, I write music, so that's my shakeout.
Oh!
So
Dude, no, wait. You gotta play me something. Have you got something? Flanka Mazimela. What?
So there we go.
See where it comes from. Hey! Gena man!
SMS SAVE to 34473 or call 08600 60,000 and change that ID.
And welcome back. You're still watching Unfiltered with me, Aldrin St-Pierre. This evening we're in conversation with Advocate Vusi Pikoli, the former NDPP, as well as Willie Hofmeyer, the former AFU head, and Kolani Dube from the Chubere Institute for Research and Development. Advocate Pikoli, let's move now to the question around the first citizen who holds the highest office in the land, and that person is supposed to be beyond reproach. But I look at the affidavit that you deposed in the Jacob Zuma matter, for instance, where you speak about your suspension, and you go on to say that in paragraph 68, at the time, I considered the real reason for my suspension was my unwillingness to hold off with the arrest and search warrants in the Jackie Silibi investigation, and I said much in my affidavit to the Jinwala Commission of Inquiry as well. So, how do you deal with that particular aspect, where you have somebody who's very powerful in the position as the president and the abuse of power?
Thank you, Aldrin. Let's just go back to the important question raised by Kolani and Willie. Though I couldn't get Willie because it was breaking up. I couldn't hear everything that he was saying. I simply and absolutely agree on the question of the political will.
Yeah.
Because I believe that, as we build this anti-corruption architecture, the political will has got to be the foundation as well as to be the roof, with the certain critical pillars holding this architecture. And amongst those pillars, the question of the independence is the question of the security of tenure of those who are part of this institution.
Yeah.
It's the question of the integrity. It's the question of the training and skills. Those would be, for me, some of the critical pillars. I not bargained for this question that we have asked now, though it's a matter which is out there in public, in the Jinwala Commission, and in other affidavits in court. In this particular instance, that's what I said, and that's what I believe in. And because I took my oath of office very seriously, I felt that I needed to be left alone to take the necessary decisions insofar as carrying out the work and mandate of the NPA, and in this case, it was the DSO.
Yeah.
So for me, it was an issue that I took it as one of those issues where one has got to be loyal to the oath of office and do what is right. At times, you might not even be right, but you've got the right to be wrong if you think that you are doing the right thing and you have got all the reasons to believe that the decision that you are taking is the right decision. It's not influenced by any other thing, but is influenced by the suspected crime, the facts that are there, the evidence, and the application of the law. Therefore, nothing else should cloud your judgment. Nothing else should make you not want to do what you are expected to do in terms of the law and the Constitution. So that's simply what happened in my case, and I insisted
would you
on
say,
doing the right thing.
Would you say that this demand from the minister, which you have characterized as unlawful at the time, and following the suspension letter that came from the president, that the intention was actually to influence you?
Well, it was a direct instruction. It was not even influencing. If I recall, the letter said that you shall stop the investigation and the intended prosecution until such time that I am satisfied that this will be in the public interest. Yep. Now, I think what causes, this problem is what you have, Section 179, I think 5 or so, or 6 of the Constitution, which says that the cabinet member responsible for the administration of justice shall exercise final responsibility over the NPA. Now, this is in the Constitution itself.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you have got another section of the Constitution, I think Section 34 or so, I'm not so sure, where it actually outlines as to what is meant by a cabinet member exercising final responsibility.
Yeah.
So now, if you have a mischievous cabinet member, who might choose another interpretation which he or she can justify as saying, I'm doing what the Constitution is telling me to do. And deliberately forget that, in the Act, in the NPA Act, there's yet another section, I think Section 34 or 33, which actually then says this is what is meant by final responsibility.
Yeah.
That the NTPP should be able to report to the minister in terms of progress on cases, to supply the information.
Sure, but would you agree that sorry, Advocate, we just need to go to a quick ad break, but would you agree that the buck stops with the president?
On what?
On this particular issue. When it comes to issues around how the NPA is able to fulfill its functions, and if there is any political interference, even from a member of the cabinet, that the buck stops with the president, like what recourse do you have as the NDPP? Who do you go to?
Well, unfortunately, as the NDPP, the matter ends up in Parliament.
Yeah.
And if we are going to have members of the Parliament also who are not exercising their responsibility insofar as exercising the necessary oversight of the executive, then you will have a parliament that just rubber stamps what the executive says.
And that will bring us to our conversation just after this, the tenure of former President Jacob Zuma.
De Doorns was een rustige area toen ik nog een kind was. Mannen wat saam met my gehoord geraak het in dwelms geval. Ek is na en buis, ek het die pad gekies wat vir my veiliger is en dis om rugby te speel. Ek speel hier vir die local club, de Doorns United. SABC het my lewe baie verander as kind. Hoe meer rugby ek gekyk het op TV, hoe beter het ek geword. So dit my geleer wat 'n mens ek moet wees. Deur SABC 2 wat dit moontlik gemaak het.
Well, as we conclude this conversation around the strengthening of law enforcement agencies, we asked the question around former President Jacob Zuma's tenure as the president of the country and how some may argue that the likes of the NPA have been hollowed out of skills that are necessary to investigate complicated corruption and sophisticated corruption syndicates. Velio Hofmeyer, what would you or how would you describe that tenure?
I think the description of hollowing out law enforcement is a very accurate one. But it was worse than that. I think there was a full-blown assault on law enforcement with the removal of people like Anwar Dramat, severe, a whole range of people in law enforcement were fired and removed on unlawful grounds, basically. So it was probably a full-scale war, I would describe it.
Would you say there should be a better mechanisms for people like yourself, for instance, and those who are still in the NPA to report such attempts?
Now, I think the other area that we should focus on and strengthen in the Constitution is how people can, right, and for what reason people may be fired. And I must say I've been agonizing about this issue quite a lot, both on the appointments and the firing.
Yeah.
And I think if one can have a sort of mixed process, I think the appointment of Shamila Batoy, for example, was a pretty good process. But my suggestion, frankly, is that when it comes to the firing of heads of law enforcement, is I think the Chief Justice should have the power to appoint the judges who should be in charge of that process.
Okay.
I think the judiciary is probably the institution that one has the most faith in. And so if one has a process that is not under control of politicians, but under control of the judiciary, I think that we can avoid in future some of the terrible injustices that have been taken place in the last 10, 15 years.
Okay, Xolani, just in conclusion, but this would be the same judiciary that we're seeing now in the Western Cape High Court division where where divisions also play out and sometimes even allegations of political interference?
Look, Aldrin, I think in summary we can say there's been a snowballing coup in our country, and in the past 9 years or even now, that coup has been launched successfully by the ANC because they've managed to capture the institution that belongs to the South Africans. And so there is nothing that we can argue for or against if these institutions still decide by the congregation in ANC conferences to come out and decide which institution is supposed to proceed or not. And so that's why I'm saying there is a coup that has been happened in our country, and ANC successfully has captured our country through their coup. Hence, you can see corruption and so forth ravaging our society. And so I think that the good citizen of this country must start to stand up and say, all the Chapter 9 institutions must not be decided by the ANC, and the people who are there are supposed to be professionals, not the employees or people who have historical connection with the ANC, because we know what they happen. They end up being part of the faction in the ANC.
Well, thank you so much. Unfortunately, we've run out of time because even if you speak about the president, it's the president himself who appoints the Chief Justice as well, isn't it? Well, Advocate Vusi Pikoli as well as Vili Hofmeyer and Xolani Dube, really appreciate your time and thank you so much for all your contributions. We've come to the end of today's conversation as well as this topic. Let's continue to have those conversations on social media using the hashtag SABC Unfiltered. From me, Aldrin Simpi, and the rest of the team, it is goodbye. Who's standing by? Who's that guy standing by on the other side? Well, you see him shortly. This is the globe. Look at Peter. Bye-bye.